President of the European Parliament, President of the European Investment Bank, President of the European Court of Auditors, members of the European Parliament and other authorities, ladies and gentlemen. As General Director of New Economy Forum, it's a pleasure for me to welcome you to the inaugural event of our activities in Brussels, capital of the European Union. And we do so with the significant intervention of Ms. Roberta Metsola, President of the European Parliament, introduced by Ms. Nadia Calviño, President of the European Investment Bank. Two women who symbolize intelligence, authority, and commitment to Europe. Undoubtedly, a double honor. Thank you very much. New Economy International Forum was founded in the year 2000 by my father, José Luis Rodríguez, PhD in journalism, as an organization for political, economic, and social analysis and debate, and has demonstrated a deep pro-European vocation in 6 Spanish cities, with 200 events a year, year after year, in which, under the registered trademark Forum Europa, speakers from all parties, governments, and the main European and global institutions, business people, representatives of civil society, and the media have participated. A non-partisan, neutral meeting point where ideas and proposals are shared in a friendly and constructive atmosphere. My father and I, President and General Director of the New Economy Forum, have decided to start our activities in the capital of the European Union, coinciding, on the one hand, with the end of a legislature that has been definitely marked by coronavirus pandemic and its consequences, as well as extraordinary geopolitical and economic tensions. And on the other hand, the proximity of the elections to the European Parliament in June, which demands spaces such as Forum Europa, where it is possible to explain and share ideas and proposals for a new paradigm. That's why our slogan says, ideas to strengthen the Union. Our Forum Europe starts today in Brussels with a mission of contributing to this much-needed debate. We will do so thanks to the sponsorship of 5 companies that have demonstrated their strong commitment to Europe and to European citizens: Airbus, International Airlines Group, Indra, Solaria, and Telefónica. We would like to thank them for their essential contribution to this project. Without further ado, I give the floor to Ms. Nadia Calviño, the President of the European Investment Bank, to introduce Ms. Metsola.
Well, thank you very much, Diego. Good morning, everyone. Dear President Metsola, dear Roberta, dear friends, so many friends I see here today. Thank you very much for coming. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to welcome you all here today, and it's a fantastic privilege, I think, to be here present at this founding moment of the New Economy Forum, the Nueva Economía Forum in this Forum Europa, here at the heart of the European Union in Brussels. So we all know, I mean, the Spanish persons in the room know very well how Nueva Economía Forum has established its brand as a very interesting, one of the most interesting debate organizers in our country. But I think today's event is marking the extension, the enlargement of this initiative, going beyond the national borders, this international edition, and I think there couldn't be a better moment to actually take this step, because Europe is really at a crossroads. The European Union has taken very important decisions just in the last weeks, and just thinking about the areas where I am active, talking about our budget, talking about economic governance, support to Ukraine. These are areas and these decisions, I think, show that when we all work together, we can really be strong and lead the way. Together we can make a difference in closing the investment gap for the twin green and digital transitions, in seizing this opportunity to foster growth, a just transition process, and so making these transitions a European success. I think together we can deepen our single market, contribute to Europe's competitiveness, strategic autonomy, economic security, facing in a successful manner current geopolitical and international uncertainties, and at the end of the day, making Europe a better place to live for future generations. And there is, of course, there are many persons in this room, but there is one special person in this room that is making a tremendous effort to raise awareness of Europe's value added and the importance of voting in the upcoming elections, convincing citizens that it is up to them to shape the future, to decide what Europe they want, what do they want the future of their children and grandchildren to be like. And this is, of course, Roberta Metsola, the President of the European Parliament. Now, we know each other for quite a while, and we've been together in many different circumstances and events. But, you know, when I was asked whether I would like to introduce Roberta in today's event, I didn't hesitate for 1 second. And let me share with you why. First, because I think that the fact of having a female president of the European Parliament is an inspiration for all of us, men and women. And after Simone Veil and Nicole Fontaine, you are the third woman to have been elected as President of the European Parliament, which makes us all very proud. And together with Ursula von der Leyen, Christine Lagarde, you are now also showing the female leadership, you know, at the helm of the European Union, at Europe's cockpit, really. And this is unprecedented. And I think this is a very important change, a force for change that also reassures that things will get done. No comment on this, but I think it really gives a sense of action, a driving force for standing up for what we stand for. And I think that should be really praised. I remember very well you being one of the first leaders that visited Kiev just after the break of the war, shortly after the aggression. And I think we're all very well aware of your energy and your special encouragement to young people to engage, to be active, proactive, and to take decisions. And I think this energy will surely bear fruit. Now, I also think this is a very timely event because of the upcoming elections, and it's very important to see that we are all united together in explaining to European citizens what Europe is doing for us. And many will question, what's Europe doing for us? Why should I go and vote? Why should I support pro-European parties? No? And this is my moment of advertisement. I'll be very short, but I can assure you the European Investment Bank Group can provide many examples, many down-to-earth, real-life examples of why Europe matters and what Europe is doing for European citizens. We support hundreds of projects every day, which directly benefit businesses, companies, our economies, and the reality on the ground. Wherever you will go in the coming weeks, you will be seeing an EIB-financed project. I have no doubt whatsoever. This morning, as we were coming here, I have passed many projects. We don't have the signs, I wish we did, but that have been financed by the European Investment Bank. Just 3 examples of what we have done in the last weeks, and I've been able to see since I took office in the beginning of January. We have just supported a Swedish company, Northvolt, to expand to build the first circular battery production outside Asia with a 1 billion investment. And we cherished and we nurtured the project from the start, and we see how this is contributing to Europe's strategic autonomy. But we also are financing the connection between Sicily, Sardinia, and the Italian peninsula with a nearly 1,000 kilometers submarine cable. We are also supporting, just some days ago, support to farmers in Greece so that they can be more resilient in front of droughts and also water-related disasters. And all of this is showing how the green transition and cohesion policy, the Director General for Cohesion Policy is here, you will always hear me say this, the green transition, cohesion policy, competitiveness are just 3 different sides of a coin, and we need to make them the strength of Europe going forward. Let me turn to your beautiful home country just to mention how last autumn we joined forces with the Malta Development Bank and signed a 30 million euro loan to finance small-scale green investments. And these are solar roofs, this is self-consumption, charging infrastructures in public and private buildings, waste recycling projects. Partnerships like these are at the heart of our success. And I am proud, as the president of the European Investment Bank Group, that to be an institution that translates ideas, dreams, expectations, and European policies into real projects on the ground, and deepening our partnership with other institutions, and in particular with the European Parliament, is one of my top priorities since I took this job, and one where you will see me absolutely committed going forward. So those are the reasons why I am so extremely glad that beyond our daily cooperation, and we're working very closely also with the communication team in the run-up to the elections, I could today feature and signal this unity and the importance of partnerships and the power of working together in introducing the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you all, dear President Calviño, dear Nadia, dear President Murphy, dear Tony, dear fellow colleagues, members of the European Parliament, dear Europeans, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for honoring the possibility and giving me the opportunity to be with you here today at the first Nueva Economia Forum being held outside Spain. I am especially touched by the words of the new president of the European Investment Bank, Nadia Calviño, who runs this bank, but I also know her as a committed European and a friend. And as she said, not too long ago, the idea that the EIB president and the European Parliament president I was going to say would be wearing high heels on stage. You are not wearing high heels today, but would have seemed impossible. Because that down the road there would be the President of the European Commission and head of the Central Bank walking in the same shoes would have surprised many. But you know what's an even bigger surprise? That now few give it a second thought. We have come a long way. We know a little bit what it is like for women in politics and how great the responsibility is on us to keep making cracks in that glass ceiling to make it easier for girls and women who come next. And when we talk about the main achievements of the European Union, we will talk about legislation and rules put in place, but I also want to acknowledge how far we have come in terms of societal and political change, in terms of giving European girls and boys role models. Because we should not make the mistake of assuming that it is something that came about by accident. It came about by people who sacrificed, by people who believed, by people who voted. We are about to embark on a process leading to the largest multinational democratic exercise that the world has ever seen. And that places on us an onus of responsibility that we should be ready to shoulder. Because democracy is something we too often take for granted in Europe. A few days ago, democracy lost one of her flag bearers. The death of Alexei Navalny in his Russian Arctic prison is a reminder again of why we must stand up for Europe, why it matters what Europe looks like in the next 5 years, why it matters to us and why it matters to the world. There is a lot at stake and we must be ready to meet this moment. When I took office, I could not even begin to predict what would happen during my mandate. But I spoke at the very beginning of how people across Europe would look to the European Parliament for leadership and direction, while others would continue to test the limits of our democratic values and European principles. How brutal that test would be when just a few weeks later, on the 24th of February, almost 2 years ago today, on Saturday, 2022, Russian tanks rolled into sovereign independent Ukraine. And I'm really proud that members of the European Parliament, EU institutions and member states rallied with unprecedented unity, also unpredictable in the first few hours after the election in January 2022. And we will continue to condemn this aggression. We will continue to impose crippling sanctions on Russia's war machine. We will continue to call for Russian assets to be used to rebuild Ukraine. And we will continue to assist Ukraine in becoming full member of the European Union. And on top of this, we will continue to provide political, economic, military, financial, humanitarian and diplomatic assistance to Ukraine, and we will do this for as long as it takes. And I'm asked this a lot. Why do you say for as long as it takes? It's been 2 years. Can we continue to uphold it? And my answer is always clear. We will do this because our values and our way of life matter. Because if there's one thing that the European Union and Europe stands for, it's for humanity. It's for real peace, peace with dignity, with accountability, and with justice. It is the same philosophy that drives our reaction to the situation in the Middle East, to the horrific humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. That is why we have pushed for a ceasefire, the return of the hostages so viciously taken in October, and for Hamas to no longer operate with impunity. That is how we get more aid into Gaza. That is how we save more lives. And crucially, that is the basis for us advocating for a two-state solution that gives perspective to the Palestinian people and security to Israel, with Gaza led by legitimate Palestinian authorities. This is how we find that peace that has eluded generations. And the answer can only be political, because our hearts must be big enough for all the victims, and our minds must have the capacity to find the political will to break the cycle of history. Peace cannot be taken for granted. We've seen how war is no longer unthinkable. Europe's collective security is in that regard paramount, and that is why we need a real security and defense framework, one that does not replicate what exists, but it complements it. We must be ready to adapt to changing global realities for a situation that we did not invite, that we did not want, that we did really everything to avoid, but one that we must stand ready for. And this is Europe's call for peace. And our security is essential for all of us, not only because of state actors. In a couple of weeks, we will mark 20 years since those deadly terrorist attacks in Madrid that killed 193 people and injured nearly 2,000 others. We still mourn the loss of loved ones. All this to say that the last years have not been easy, but in my home country, in Malta, we have a saying: the strongest steel is forged in the hottest of fires. And that is why I argue that despite everything, Europe is stronger than it has ever been. That the crises we have faced have shaped us, have made us more resilient, more determined and more united than ever. And as President of the European Parliament, together with all the members, we have made it our mission to burst through the Brussels bubble. Okay, it's a little bit difficult to say it in this room, but we have made it our mission to go beyond these walls and to bring Europe closer to its citizens and to build a stronger Europe, one that makes everyone's life a little bit easier, a little bit fairer, a little bit safer. Now, the European Union is by no means perfect. There is much left to do and much left to deliver. Our processes sometimes frustrate even me. But my answer is not to destroy, but to build better, to build more sustainably, to listen more to our young people, more to our farmers, more to all those for whom the promise of Europe still seems too far away, to deliver effective laws that help people, that tackle corruption and abuse, and that end the intergenerational struggles of poverty, of inequality, and disenfranchisement. And I am convinced we can recapture the enthusiasm for Europe. We can show that politics is a force for good, a vehicle for positive change in our communities and our societies. That is how we can convince people to vote in the next European elections in June, by showing tangibly, concretely, to each and every individual that Europe can deliver. How at the height of the pandemic that hit countries like Spain very hard, we managed to ensure the joint provision of vaccines and ventilators. We made huge steps forward in our joint capacity for healthcare. We supported jobs and businesses and came together like never before to agree on €723 billion recovery and resilience facility, which has helped national economies recover. And our economic governance, and the European Parliament played a very crucial role in that regard, has yielded results. On migration, a European issue that requires a European response. We have been asked by our citizens each and every election. In my country, this will be the 5th European election since 20 years ago. Together with another 9, we joined the European Union. In every country, in 2019, we were asked to address this challenge, multifaceted, different, depending on each country, geography, to be addressed at a European level. And we managed. Together we have defied the odds by reaching a monumental European deal. A deal that is fair with those who are in need of protection. A deal that is firm with those who are not eligible for asylum. And one that is harsh with traffickers who exploit the most vulnerable. And we will go into these elections with a message that no EU member state will be left alone. Because we know how that narrative can capture a political spirit of a campaign and drive people to the fringes. Because we would not have explained well. We would not have communicated our successes and how we did it. On enlargement, the EU opened accession negotiations with Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova last year. We have granted candidate status to Georgia and are stepping up our engagement with the Western Balkans. And to this day, and we are convinced in the European Parliament that this is the European Union's greatest geopolitical asset. We experienced its windfall before, and we must be ready for a union of 30, of 33, or 35. On the digital transition, our new laws are critical and will ensure the modernization of our legislation, of the way we keep up with technology, in order to help innovation, growth, competitiveness, but also to protect, to safeguard our children online, while at the same time boosting our economic growth, to strengthen our autonomy and freedom. We used to talk about the term strategic autonomy a lot before 2022, how different that term today means and how necessary and multifaceted it is today. For the next generation of Europeans, with Erasmus+, I'm a proud Erasmus alumna. I would not have learnt French if I did not go to France and spend 5 months in northern Brittany under the pouring rain every day as someone coming from the south and trying to study, but eventually I just learned the language. Youth Guarantee, asked of us by so many of our young people, say, please give us the possibility for us to be able to have a little bit of help before we have the financial ways to do it ourselves. Horizon Europe, academia, how important that was. How we had first a hit post-Brexit and are now recovering from it. Invest EU, giving young people across Europe the opportunity to fulfill their ambition. And as you said, Nadia, we don't say this enough. People pass by our villages, our towns, our cities, and we have not told them that that is thanks to the European Union, that that is thanks to investment in our national capital, our national talent. We don't say that. It is not in anyone's interest for us to say that. Let's make sure that we do it, because we can prove that Europe means something they can touch, they can see, they can benefit from every day. On artificial intelligence, on protecting journalists from abuse, on trade, on climate, on leveling up our societies, we have made real inroads. We're at over 800 pieces of legislation in this mandate alone. It will be a real record, actually. The question is how to bridge it with communicating and implementing it correctly. And on all this, and I'll focus a little bit on climate, the European Union has been the most influential global actor in advancing the international agenda on decarbonization and the fight against climate change. This is extremely important. Never let it go from the very top of our agenda. But it is also true that there exists an invisible line that people cannot be pushed beyond. People must have confidence in the process. They must be able to afford it. Otherwise, we will not succeed. And this would risk driving more and more people to the comfort of the political fringes. That is why we must be better able to cushion the economic and social impact of our decisions. On agriculture specifically, we need to find a balance between ensuring our farmers are able to feed our continent and secure their livelihoods and their children's livelihoods while saving our planet. And I'm convinced we can manage that. And in each country, as I go from one country to another to discuss not only with the authorities but with young people, I am meeting also farmers with different individual requests, different individual demands and frustrations, which we need to be able to understand. We cannot have gone from asking them 4 years ago when the pandemic hit to help us, to take their products and put them in our society because we depended on them, only for us to tell them 4 years later that we can in any way do the green transition without them. So while we are proud of our successes, we must also be honest about where we can do better, where we have gone too far, too fast, where we have not gone far enough, and where we did not match people's expectations. We must discuss real concerns, how to keep people's trust in our project, how to maintain European competitiveness in a polarized global context, how to build a just, green, and resilient future, how to boost innovation in European manufacturing in the context of tense global economic relations, how to safeguard our energy security. And we must be prepared for further change still. We need to stay on a stable path for sustainable long-term growth. But bringing sustainability into our economic model must be part of a broader strategy that incorporates every sector. It must provide real incentives and safety nets. And above all, it must work for people. It worries me that in many places there is a generation of people who, despite having all the information of the world at their fingertips, are more skeptical than ever before, who are tempted by a cynical black and white narrative when the reality is always 1,000 shades of grey, who take the rights that Europe protects and the opportunities that our union gives for granted. We cannot allow, we've seen it already on a national level, that generation to either stay home or retreat to the extremes. Next week I will go to Spain to encourage Spanish people, especially young people, to vote in the European elections on the 9th of June 2024, and to raise awareness about the importance of choosing the members of the European Parliament that will steer European policy over the next 5 years. The next 5 years will not be easy. What sort of European Parliament we see for the next 5 years matters. So the next 105 days, it's scary every day, I see a speech with a lower number, will be about pushing back against that easy cynicism that has crept into the political discourse of too many, about how we can build instead of destroying. That is what we mean by constructive forces, and I'm convinced we can do that. We have managed extremely well despite all the difficulties over the past 5 years, but I am convinced that people will hand back the next European Parliament as an institution that is stronger, that is more agile, and that is better able to deliver. We can only do that if we don't take Europe for granted. Thank you very much. I'm not done yet. You asked me a question. I'm not done yet. Okay, sorry.
We can't let you off the hook so easily,
No,
Roberta.
no doubt.
Madam President, sorry. But
Roberta.
I've known you for more than a decade now.
More than a decade, that's true.
My name is Chris Burns, ex-CNN, Bloomberg TV, Euronews, and have been in the Parliament for more than a decade. And
From Indiana, can you say that? You are.
Como?
That where you are from. Say it, where you are from.
From Los Angeles.
From Los Angeles, but
yes.
you did Notre Dame. Yeah, I remember.
Mais d'une mère française et je suis citoyen européen. Excuse me.
Exact. Yeah.
Despite the accent. But what's always been very impressive is to hear when we did so many interviews about so many issues, and each time, as an MEP, you were always very trenchant, very able to put your finger on the issue and communicate it to the public, always. And you were always, we like to call it immediate Miss Soundbite. So it's to the point. So we hope to get as many questions and answers from you as possible. And, but I'd like to start with one thing, a couple of things. One is, I've seen you're doing your European tour right now, and you were in Poland last week. And you met Lech Wałęsa, you went to Gdańsk, you went to Warsaw, where there was a Warsaw uprising. I don't know if you've seen on the social networks that beautiful picture of you with all these other people at the Warsaw uprising. Very moving, very moving. How much did Nawalny's death give more import and weight to what you saw and did last week?
Yeah, it was, first of all, Poland was a significant visit because that is a country that will celebrate 20 years of EU membership, and where by far the discussion that I'm having in these countries, including my own, that have spent the past 20 years in the European Union, is that we are no longer the so-called new kids on the block, and that it is time for a proper reflection process. And it was a thread across all the meetings I went to as to what has worked well, what could work better. Among all the discussions that I had with the Prime Minister, of course, with various ministers, with students.
Yeah.
I went to my alma mater, the Natolin campus of College of Europe. But the discussion with Lech Wałęsa was something else. It was before we found out that Alexei Navalny had been assassinated, but if it had taken place as we found out, I don't think the discussion would have been any different because the clarity of purpose with which he spoke and about the danger of autocracy, about the danger of having aggressive, expansionist, unreliable neighbors is something that I will cherish forever, as he did when he led the Solidarność movement and then became president of the country. One anecdote which I would like to share with you from Gdansk is that 20 years ago, my predecessor, Pat Cox, president from Ireland, had taken the decision that the flagpoles that we have outside the Strasbourg Parliament were built and made in Gdansk.
Yes.
And the decision then was momentous to say, we are in the process of having Poland join the European Union after the long struggle that country had together with its neighbors, the development post-communism, the democratic build-up of a country that is now at the heart of Europe, needs to have something permanently here. And that today, on one of those poles, the Ukrainian flag waves. I think that's pretty symbolic and significant.
Absolutely, and also that the Solidarność flag waves in your office,
Yes.
I understand.
Yes.
That's quite interesting.
Absolutely.
Second question for me is, you recently said that Europe must be ready to step up irrespective of what happens in the United States. So with a reluctant Congress on aid to Ukraine and on Trump's recent rantings about NATO, how much does that energize, in a strange way, the drive for a European defense, for European security? And what's the feeling, what's the sense in the Parliament about that?
Yeah, you know, when I said at the very beginning of my address that 2024 will be the largest democratic exercise, you know, there has never been a year with so many elections, including the United States. And the only election whose result is predictable is Russia. So I will continue to work for the most, let's say, open, let's say, democratic exercise and look forward to seeing the discourse as it develops across the pond. And hope that certain comments passed are in the context of the current very divisive political campaign. I need to hope that. But if that serves to revitalize us, something that should have happened, frankly, when we saw the United States pulling out of Afghanistan, something that we should have seen coming when we realized that we cannot be reliant, as some countries were 100% reliant on Russian gas, something that we should have realized when we found it easy, or at least most simple responses to move from one unreliable partner to another for energy security. And if we don't realize it now, I don't know what we will be able to say in November, December. So we have an opportunity. When we say that we need to create a proper security union, is that we are prepared. Now, of course, keeping in mind different national neutrality militarily, constitutionally realities. But if I think simply about having resisted and once having actually succumbed as a parliament to a very quite strong attack by Russia on our servers as an institution, because we called Russia a state sponsor of terrorism, in a resolution, that can only give you an idea, especially now when we see how vulnerable also a European election campaign is, because security is about peace, and it is also making sure that those people who are scrolling incessantly, I have my kids doing this all the time, it scares the hell out of me, is that I would like that at least some of the messages they see on that screen can get to those young ones who will be asked to vote, and that they will be convinced to vote for the constructive pro-European majority if they see it, because we are being drowned out. That's security for me.
Right, so we need secure elections before we get to anything else. And speaking of Russian gas, here's a question from Antonio Lopez Isturiz, Member of Parliament, European Parliament. Would it not be good for the European Parliament to establish a position regarding the policy of some member states, such as Spain and Belgium, to continue and even increase the purchase of gas from Russia, from Putin?
So if we think about where we were 2 years ago, where we were at over 90% reliant, and now we're at less than 7% reliant, that gives you an idea about how far we've come. But it also showed us in those early days of the war how much a bunch of energy islands we were. So specifically, the Iberian Peninsula being an example, that we could do so much more by working with our European Union neighbors, rather than having no option but to build pre-hydrogen gas pipes across the sea. But we have doubled down on our investment in renewables, which will serve to go towards the answer to Tono, because we have, one, no choice but to double down on the green transition. We need to match our actions with our rhetoric, and also explain that the initial cost of doing this is going to serve us in the longer term. Now, will this be enough to run our industries? You know, we have met people who tell us, I am the governor of one part of a country that has a significantly large, one of the largest left in Europe, industry. The minute my energy bills go up, it's driven out of Europe. We have, Nadia mentioned, solar energy before. We are still way too far away from having the infrastructure that we need. We have cities in Europe that have more electricity charges for electric vehicles than whole countries. This is a reality. So I think that doubling down and using this very difficult period in order to use the investment to where we can and eventually bring the cost down for consumers, work with partners in order to double down on renewables. And that's the only way we can start to rely less on gas. And not only that comes from Russia, but also from countries that are, very frankly, exploiting the loopholes of our sanctions packages only for it to be returned back to Europe. That's something we need to be very honest with ourselves, I think.
Yeah, these efforts are part of European Energy Union, right? That's what we're aiming for.
We should have.
Yeah,
I mean, when
it
we
should
talk
have been a long time
about,
ago.
I mean, we talk about, we spend a lot of time and reasonably so, because when we say what works for somehow EU 27 will not work for 32, 33, 35, is impossible to do in the current framework. But if there's one thing that we could have learned, is that, some sort of better cooperation on health would, so that we are prepared for the next pandemic if it happens or when it happens.
Right.
Are we prepared? We promised ourselves that we would have better preparedness. Where are we? States got together. All countries got together. I remember specifically end of 2022, end of 2021, saying, let's do it. Where are we?
It
And
took a pandemic
energy
to drive
union,
that, didn't it?
we were discussing this for years.
Yeah.
Shouldn't, when we talk about the change and the updating of our infrastructure framework, treaty framework, okay, look at Dominic, he's right in front of me, he's the expert here on this. But shouldn't we talk about policy areas that everybody agrees when crisis hits that we need to do more about?
Yeah, yeah. Well, there are national interests there that clash on health union, on energy union. What about banking? What about banking union? I got a question here from Alejandra Quinteran of the Spanish Banking Association. Europe's strong determination to increase economic weight, competitiveness, and open autonomy requires strong financing capacity. And she goes on, but what I want to get to the bottom line here is European banking union is needed to end fragmentation, increase scale, stability, and financial firepower. How can we make progress on this, on European banking union? And again, it's the same thing. When?
This is something I have discussed with many banks and CEOs that I meet, who tell me their, in a way, frustration, but also understanding that when we think back to pre-Lehman Brothers crisis, 2008, that out of the 10 largest banks in Europe, in the world, 9 were here. Today, only 1. Can I say that? Yeah, I can say that. Have we become better in terms of capital movement, in terms of creating a digital access to our citizens, for them to move as other continents have moved on the digital currency, etc. So here, the European Parliament is extremely clear. We tend to, let's say, use this text a lot. It's not us, it's the Council, this phrase. But here, I am convinced that we can do more. We were at the 25th anniversary of the Euro in Frankfurt. Every single speaker took center stage that evening and said, including national leaders, said we need to have a capital markets union and a European banking union.
Right. So
that was 7-8 months ago.
So there is a will there.
I'm hoping there is a will.
Yeah.
Because, you know, financially and for our consumers, it makes sense. From a firepower that we need as a continent in order to compete with others, it makes sense. But if you have 1, 2, 3 member states that don't show that political will, then we will have problems. But I have Nadia and Tony here, so I will ask them to convince the national leaders.
It's a day-long conference there. I need to group some questions here because we got to move on very soon. Enrique Lizaso, Multiverse Computing, how do you plan to improve and enhance the European tech sovereignty in deep tech to be independent and as strong as the USA and China? Padre Angel asks, Dear President, are these plans to create a European Parliament Committee for Social Solidarity? It has been made in other countries like Japan, so social solidarity. And Solaria is asking, Madam President, the European Investment Bank is openly supporting the deployment of renewables in the EU with its investments. What measures is the European Parliament working on to accelerate the implementation of these clean energies?
Ourselves as an institution, whoever, is it here? Is the question being made by somebody in the room?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so ourselves as an institution, what are we doing,
yes,
right?
What's
Yeah.
What's
Okay,
the Parliament doing about that?
So,
I know you have legislation on that, don't you?
Yeah, loads. Okay, so on deep tech, I mean, here, in a way, the comparison between the US and China is difficult to make. It's because one thing is the race which we are running slowly as a continent when competing with a very open, deregulated society that is the United States, as opposed to a completely regulated society as is China. So where are we getting it wrong? We legislate, we have adopted the Digital Services Act, we adopted the Digital Markets Act, they are in force. We have the world's first Artificial Intelligence Act, which will not be in force by the European elections. But if you ask me what is our biggest, let's say, navigation with tech companies, is not only for them to come in line, and there is willingness, to be clear, because we are their largest consumers, to make sure that our rules are abided by, but that we do not, let's say, make it possible, or only possible, for propaganda, misinformation, disinformation to go through. With deep fakes, it is specific, so there we have a very clear law enforcement capacity. But to give you an example, one of the largest sticking points in the last few hours of the Artificial Intelligence Act negotiations was, what is the role of law enforcement when we talk about manipulating voting behavior, when we talk about facial technology, allowing public spaces to become subject to security measures. This was, and for all of us, and it was very difficult sort of from a legislation point of view, and there were very clear, positions by the Parliament and by member states, but to bridge that with what is technologically feasible and how we make sure that those tech companies whose leadership reside very far away have to come in line with what we have legislated. So it would be very tricky, but to be very clear, I mean, if you think about what happened a few weeks ago during the New Hampshire primary in the US, when calls were being made, it did not require deep fakes, it was just calls being made that people thought was Joe Biden on the phone telling them not to vote. This is the kind of the way that AI can be used in order to impersonate, but also to manipulate voting behavior. Social solidarity, I would say, is already within the competence of our Employment Committee, and also our Culture Committee and Civil Liberties Committee. So what we are trying to do now, and I have a few chairs of committees in front of me, Spanish members, who are, we are looking at the reform, and we have undergone one of the largest ever reforms in the European Parliament that had been decades late, in order for us to look at our competencies and in order for us to be better prepared for the next Commission. In other words, how would we react to a legislative proposal that is clearly going to come from a very geopolitical time? And there agreed that the social solidarity, I'm not familiar with what there is in Japan, I will have a look at it, but that when we talk about the social and economic impact and the cushions that we need to place in order to keep our people on board, so I give you an example, part of the carbon border adjustment mechanism, the emissions trading system, and the social climate fund was a cushion for our small businesses, small and medium-sized enterprises, even micro enterprises in our societies on which our economies are built. On renewables and what the EP, so the European Parliament has had to take very bold decisions in the past few months. And that is in a situation where we've had buildings that we've owned for 25 years, after years of, let me be very blunt, kicking the can down the road and nobody wanting to do anything about it because it's politically sensitive. I was faced with a very clear message from the Belgian authorities that if we don't do something about it now, we have no parliament in 2028, 2029. So we have actually done very well as an institution in terms of energy saving, because we own the buildings and we haven't rented, so we have also financially saved a lot of money. But we will need to completely renovate one particular building, which is our Spark building, over the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, depends on the Belgian authorities, 10, 11, 12 years, into making sure that we can operate here. But we're on target, we're on track, and we're pretty proud of what we did, I must say.
Okay, Roberta, a big hand to Roberta for the Q&A part. In terms of logistics, why not stay where you are? Because we want to have one quick final word from you. After Nathalie Erard, who's with Airbus, one of the sponsors of this event, Senior Vice President for EU and NATO Affairs at Airbus. You'll be speaking on behalf of the sponsors of the program of Forum Europa. Please.
President of the European Parliament, President of the European Investment Bank, dear members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say a few words, and I'm honored to do that for this first forum in Brussels. Let me thank you first for your inspired word on the political aspect, and as well on the pragmatic messages you sent on the criticality of an efficient implementation of the green and digital transition, and the necessity to build a security and defense framework. All those are very important for us, the industry and the aerospace defense. I want to thank as well the New Economy Forum. I think it's a critical time, as we said. We live in a dangerous world, and I think it's a necessity to foster the dialogue between the top of the EU institutions and the industry. So thank you very much for that. And then if you allow me, 2 comments from a European employee working for a European company. Airbus was built thanks to the idea of strategic autonomy. And this idea was shared among many states, including the Spanish state. Today, we need the European Union to embrace this idea of European strategic autonomy. And my 2 messages would be for all of us, because we, as Airbus, we live Europe on a daily basis. First, a message of responsibility. Yes, it is easier to do it nationally sometimes, or it is quicker. But we have a responsibility towards making it better, making it bigger, to compete in the world of today. The second message, because we hear a lot about challenges, tough times, difficulty, are we going to be strong enough? Well, that would be a message of hope. Extraordinary engineers in Europe, across Europe, made great aircraft and enable Europe to be a worldwide leader in a very tough competition. So we can make it together. Let's believe in ourselves. Let's believe in our strengths so that we can continue to build. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nathalie Erard. Thank you. So, merci Nathalie. Merci. A final word from Roberta. You have, you're busy right up until the elections going. You want to hit as many countries as you can out of the EU 27.
I need to get elected on my own. Huh?
Well,
so
yeah, there's that too. Yes, exactly. Talking about hope, as Nathalie talked about, give us a sense. What up to now, you've already visited a number of countries. How much hope do you have from what you saw that we can have good elections, that voters care, and we'll get a good parliament in there, making the right decisions after that?
Look, first of all, thank you, Natalie, for your words. That last sentence that you said, let's believe in ourselves, is that thread that I have seen increasingly in member states. You have government leaders who are proud of what they've achieved despite all the difficulties. You've had partners who have looked at Europe as the life-saving element of the past 5 years, that when it came to the very difficult periods, if it were not for Europe, we would not have managed. We tried at the beginning of the pandemic to go our way. We have had a period where more internal state borders were closed than ever, and that is not conducive to us having hope and belief. We've worked too hard to get our rights and our opportunities. Countries are desperate to join the European Union. You go to Romania and Bulgaria, why are they not in the Schengen area yet? These are things that we need to project, that we can be bigger, that we can be better if we are bigger. And we are bigger not in terms only of economic growth, but we are bigger in terms of values and in terms of security, because that is what makes everybody level up to being equal. So thank you very much. 105 days to go. Please vote. Not only you, please don't forget to register. I'll do the usual spiel now, but it's true actually, a lot of you live here and you say, oh, I think I can vote here, I don't know. We are running a very good information campaign on our website, right, Jaume? You can press and say, look, where can I vote, what are the dates, etc., etc. And most importantly, convince people who are not yet convinced to vote. And if you can do it one step further, is that, you know, building is always better than destroying. And there are some who are trying to get into the European Parliament to do just that. Let's not let them. Thank you very much.
Roberta, thank you very much. And my apologies for not getting to some of the questions, but you'll just have to come back to the next one. This is only the first. And hashtag Forum Europa. Let's tweet this thing. Thank you very much.